Lady Emily Windsor stood at the window of her private apartment in Buckingham Palace, watching the morning mist rise from the gardens she had loved since childhood. At 28, she was the youngest member of the royal family to hold significant public duties, and the weight of expectation had always been her constant companion. But this morning was different. This morning, she carried a secret that could change everything. The phone call had come at exactly 6:15 a.m., 3 minutes that would forever divide her life into before and after. The voice on the other end belonged to Dr. Sarah Mitchell from St. Mary's Hospital, and her words had shattered Emily's carefully constructed world. The test results were conclusive. Emily was pregnant. The father was someone whose identity would send shockwaves through the establishment and destroy lives across 2 continents. Emily's hands trembled as she replayed those 3 minutes in her mind. Dr. Mitchell had been kind but professional, explaining the options available and the need for discretion given Emily's public position. The doctor had no idea that her patient was grappling with something far more complex than an unplanned pregnancy. This child represented a love affair that had been conducted in absolute secrecy, a relationship that violated every protocol and expectation placed upon a member of the royal family. The father was Captain James Rodriguez, decorated war hero, who served as Emily's personal protection officer. Their relationship had begun innocently enough. Built on shared conversations during long car journeys and quiet moments between official engagements, James was intelligent, compassionate, and utterly devoted to his duty of keeping Emily safe. But somewhere along the way, professional respect had deepened into something neither of them had intended or planned. Emily closed her eyes and remembered the moment everything changed. It had been during a state visit to Scotland, in a small cottage where they had taken shelter from an unexpected storm. The formal barriers between them had dissolved in those hours of enforced intimacy, and they had acknowledged feelings that both knew could never be openly expressed. The single night they had spent together had been tender, passionate, completely impossible to reconcile with their respective roles. For 6 months, they had managed to maintain the pretense that nothing had changed. James continued to perform his duties with professional excellence, while Emily carried on with her royal obligations, smiling for cameras and attending state functions. Only they knew about the stolen glances, the brief touches when no one was watching, and the conversations conducted in careful code when others were present. But now, sitting in her opulent apartment surrounded by centuries of royal history and tradition, Emily faced a choice that no protocol manual could guide her through. She was carrying the child of a man she loved but could never publicly acknowledge, a man whose career would be destroyed if their relationship became known, a man who had risked everything simply by falling in love with the wrong person. The knock on her door interrupted her thoughts, and Emily's heart jumped as she recognized the familiar pattern. 3 short taps, a pause, then 2 more. It was James, arriving for his morning briefing as he had done hundreds of times before. But this time, Emily would have to look into his eyes and find a way to tell him that their secret had produced the most dangerous consequence imaginable. James entered the room with his usual professional demeanor, his tall frame commanding respect in his immaculate uniform. At 35, he was a career soldier who had served in Afghanistan and Iraq before being selected for the elite Royal Protection Unit. His dark eyes had seen combat and tragedy, but they softened whenever he looked at Emily, though he was careful to ensure no one else ever noticed. Emily studied his face as he delivered his morning security briefing, noting the strong jawline and the small scar above his left eyebrow that she had traced with her finger during their one night together. She memorized every detail, knowing that once she spoke the words that were burning inside her, nothing would ever be the same between them. The briefing concluded with James's customary request for any concerns or changes to the day's schedule. Emily took a deep breath, knowing that this was the moment that would define both their futures. She had rehearsed the words in her mind, but now they seemed impossible to speak. How do you tell someone that 3 minutes of medical results have changed everything? Instead of the professional response James expected, Emily asked him to sit down. The request was so unusual that James immediately understood something significant was happening. His training had taught him to recognize danger in all its forms. The expression on Emily's face triggered every instinct he possessed. Emily began by telling James about the phone call. Watching his confusion gave way to understanding, and then to something that looked like panic. She saw him calculate the timing, remember their night together, and realize what her news meant for both of them. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever, filled with the weight of implications neither wanted to voice. When James finally spoke, his voice was hoarse with emotion. He asked Emily what she wanted to do, and she realized that this was perhaps the first time in her adult life that someone had asked for her personal wishes rather than assuming what duty required. The question opened floodgates of emotion that Emily had been holding back since the phone call. She told James that she loved him. Words that had never been spoken aloud between them but had been understood. Through months of careful glances and stolen moments, she told him that she wanted to keep their child, regardless of the consequences. And she told him that she was terrified of what the next few months would bring. Not just for themselves, but for everyone whose lives would be affected by their choices. James moved from his chair to kneel beside Emily, taking her hands in his and speaking words of love and commitment that violated every rule of his profession. He promised that whatever happened, he would stand by her and their child. He acknowledged that their love had created an impossible situation, but declared that he would rather face the consequences than deny what they meant to each other as they held each other in the morning light streaming through the palace windows. Emily realized that the 3 minutes that had shaken her world had also revealed the depth of love that existed between them. The phone call had forced them to confront the reality of their situation, but it had also given them something precious: the certainty that what they felt for each other was worth fighting for, regardless of the cost. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of carefully maintained normalcy that felt like the most elaborate performance of Emily's life. She attended a charity luncheon, smiled for photographers, and delivered a speech about supporting young mothers, all while carrying the secret that she herself would soon be facing the challenges she was advocating others to overcome. James maintained his professional duties with military precision, but Emily could see the tension in his shoulders, and the way his eyes constantly scanned for threats that had nothing to do with physical security. The real danger they faced came from within the palace walls, from the protocols and expectations that governed every aspect of royal life. The emotional weight of their secret began to take its toll on both of them. Emily found herself struggling to sleep, lying awake thinking about the child growing inside her and the impossible choices that lay ahead. During the day, she caught herself placing protective hands over her still flat stomach, a gesture she had to constantly suppress in public. James was fighting his own internal battle between duty and desire. His oath as a protection officer required him to put Emily's safety above all else, but now he had to reconcile that duty with his role as the father of her child. Every protocol he had sworn to uphold seemed designed to keep them apart, and the knowledge that their love could destroy both their careers weighed heavily on his conscience. The crisis Emily had been dreading came during a private family dinner. At Windsor Castle, grandmother, the Queen Mother, had always possessed an uncanny ability to read people's emotions, and Emily's distracted behavior had not gone unnoticed. After the meal, the elderly monarch requested a private word with her granddaughter. The conversation began gently, with questions about Emily's health and well-being that seemed routine. But as they walked through the castle's portrait gallery, surrounded by centuries of royal ancestors, the Queen Mother's questions became more pointed. She had noticed changes in Emily's behavior, the way she touched her stomach, and the unusual dynamic between Emily and her protection officer. Emily tried to deflect the questions, but she had never been able to lie convincingly to her grandmother. The weight of the secret, combined with the emotional turmoil of the past few days, finally overwhelmed her defenses. In the shadow of portraits depicting generations of royal duty and sacrifice, Emily broke down and confessed everything. The Queen Mother's reaction was not what Emily had expected. Instead of anger or disappointment, there was a long moment of silence followed by understanding that spoke of her own experiences with love and duty. She shared stories that Emily had never heard before, about her own youth and the choices she had faced between personal happiness and royal responsibility. The elderly monarch revealed that she had once faced a similar decision, having fallen in love with someone deemed unsuitable by the establishment. She had chosen duty over love, a decision that had shaped the rest of her life in ways both positive and difficult. She did not want Emily to face the same regrets, but she also understood the complexities of their situation better than anyone. The conversation that followed was perhaps the most honest exchange between the two women in Emily's lifetime. The Queen Mother explained the realities of royal life, sacrifices required, and the ways in which personal choices affected not just individuals, but the institution of the monarchy itself. But she also spoke about the importance of love, authenticity, and the courage required to make difficult choices. As they talked, Emily began to understand that her grandmother was not trying to dictate her choices, but rather to ensure she made them with full knowledge of the consequences. The Queen Mother had lived through decades of royal crises and understood that the monarchy's strength came not from rigid adherence to outdated rules, but from its ability to adapt while maintaining its essential dignity and purpose. The most surprising moment came when the Queen Mother asked to meet with James privately. Emily's initial panic at this request was tempered by her grandmother's assurance that she simply wanted to understand the man who had captured her granddaughter's heart. The meeting was arranged for the following evening. In the Queen Mother's private study at Clarence House, James approached the meeting with the same courage he had shown in combat zones. But Emily could see that he was more nervous than she had ever witnessed. He understood that this conversation could determine not just his own future, but Emily's happiness and the fate of their unborn child. The weight of responsibility was enormous, and Emily's heart ached watching him prepare for what might be the most important conversation of his life. The meeting lasted for over 2 hours, during which Emily paced in her apartment, imagining every possible outcome. She knew her grandmother was asking James about his intentions, his understanding of the challenges they would face, and his commitment to both Emily and their child. The questions would be direct and unflinching, designed to determine whether James truly understood what he was asking of everyone involved. When James finally returned, his expression was unreadable. He sat beside Emily and took her hands, his own still trembling slightly from the intensity of the conversation. He explained that the Queen Mother had indeed asked difficult questions, probing his motivations and his willingness to accept the sacrifices that their relationship would require. But most surprisingly, she had also asked about his dreams for the future, his hopes for their child, and his vision of how they might navigate the challenges ahead. James realized that the Queen Mother was not trying to separate them, but rather ensuring that they understood the magnitude of what they were choosing and the support they would need to succeed. The conversation had concluded with an unexpected offer. The Queen Mother proposed a solution that would allow Emily and James to be together while managing the public and institutional challenges their relationship would create. It would require careful planning, significant compromise, and the cooperation of senior palace officials. But it offered a path forward that neither Emily nor James had dared to imagine. The plan would involve James transitioning from his role as a protection officer to a position within the palace administration, removing the immediate professional conflict while allowing him to remain close to Emily. Their relationship would be gradually introduced to the public through carefully managed appearances, allowing time for acceptance and understanding to develop. Most importantly, their child would be born into a family that could openly acknowledge and celebrate both parents, rather than growing up with the burden of secrecy that had defined the early months of their existence. The Queen Mother understood that modern royal families required new approaches to old challenges. She was willing to use her influence to help create a solution. As Emily and James held each other that night, they realized that the 3 minutes that had initially seemed to threaten everything they held dear had actually opened a door to possibilities they had never dared consider. The love they shared, the child they had created, and the support of an unexpected ally had combined to offer them hope for a future that honored both their hearts and their duties. The path ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges and criticisms from those who preferred traditional approaches to royal life. But for the first time since that morning phone call, Emily and James allowed themselves to believe that their love story might have a happy ending after all. The implementation of the Queen Mother's plan began 3 weeks later with a series of careful, calculated steps designed to prepare both the palace establishment and the public for the extraordinary announcement that would eventually come. Emily found herself caught between relief at having a path forward and anxiety about the scrutiny that each phase would bring. The first challenge was James's transition from the Royal Protection Unit to his new role as Special Advisor for International Security Affairs. The position had been created specifically for him, allowing him to use his military expertise while removing the direct, superior-subordinate relationship that had made their romance so problematic. The transition required delicate handling to avoid suspicion about the real reasons behind the career change. Emily watched James struggle with the professional adjustment, knowing how much his identity had been tied to his role as a protection officer. He had dedicated his life to serving others in dangerous situations. The move to an administrative position felt like a retreat from the work that had defined him. She saw him questioning whether he was making the right choice, wondering if love was worth abandoning the career path he had worked so hard to achieve. The emotional support they provided each other during this transition period deepened their relationship in unexpected ways. Emily discovered that James needed reassurance about his worth beyond his professional achievements, while James learned to see Emily not just as the royal he was sworn to protect, but as a woman facing her own fears about motherhood and public judgment. Their first semi-public appearance together came at a military charity event, where James's new role provided natural justification for his presence at Emily's side. The evening was carefully choreographed, their interactions limited to professional exchanges, but Emily felt the electricity between them every time they spoke. She wondered if others could sense the undercurrent of intimacy beneath their formal interactions. The event went smoothly, but it marked the beginning of intense media scrutiny that neither Emily nor James had fully anticipated. Royal correspondents began noting James's frequent presence at Emily's events, and speculation started about whether there might be a romantic connection. The attention was exactly what the palace had hoped to manage gradually, but the speed at which rumors developed surprised everyone involved. Emily's pregnancy was becoming increasingly difficult to hide. As she entered her second trimester, morning sickness had given way to a small but noticeable bump that required increasingly careful wardrobe choices. Her lady-in-waiting, Margaret, had been brought into their confidence and proved invaluable in helping Emily maintain appearances. While accommodating her changing body, the most emotionally challenging moment came when Emily attended her first prenatal appointment with James. They had arranged for maximum privacy at a discreet clinic, but the simple act of seeing their child on the ultrasound screen together moved both of them to tears. James held Emily's hand as they watched the tiny figure moving on the monitor, and for a few precious minutes, they could forget about protocols and public expectations and simply be two people in love, preparing to become parents. The reality of their situation came crashing back when they left the clinic and found photographers waiting outside. Someone had leaked information about Emily's presence at the medical facility. Speculation about her health immediately began circulating. The palace was forced to issue a statement about routine medical care, but the incident highlighted how challenging it would be to maintain privacy throughout Emily's pregnancy. James's family presented another complex emotional challenge. His parents, who lived in a small town in Wales, had raised their son to respect authority and serve his country. The idea that he was involved with a member of the royal family was difficult for them to process, and the implications for their own privacy and security were overwhelming. Emily insisted on meeting James's parents personally. Despite the security complications this created, the visit to their modest home was emotionally intense for everyone involved. James's mother, Maria, was clearly nervous about hosting royalty in her small living room, while his father, Carlos, struggled to reconcile his son's professional achievements with the extraordinary situation they now found themselves in. But as the afternoon progressed, genuine connections began to form. Emily found herself relaxing in the warmth of a normal family environment, something she had rarely experienced in her own privileged but formal upbringing. Maria's maternal instincts overcame her nervousness as she began to see Emily not as a royal figure but as a young woman facing an uncertain future while carrying her first grandchild. The conversation that developed was unlike anything Emily had experienced with potential in-laws. Carlos spoke about his concerns for James's career and future, while Maria worried about the pressures that would be placed on their grandchild. But both parents also expressed their unconditional love for their son and their willingness to support whatever decisions he made about his future. Emily found herself crying as she listened to James's parents talk about their hopes and fears. Their love for their son was so different from the formal relationships she had known in her own family, and she began to understand what James might be giving up by choosing a life within the constraints of royal protocol. The visit reinforced her determination to ensure that their child would know both sides of their heritage and benefit from the warmth and authenticity that James's family could provide. The return journey to London was quiet, with both Emily and James processing the emotional intensity of introducing their two worlds to each other. Emily realized that she was not just carrying James's child, but potentially bringing an entire family into the complexities of royal life. The responsibility felt enormous, and she worried about whether she was being fair to people who had never asked to be thrust into the public spotlight. James, meanwhile, was grappling with the reality of how different their backgrounds truly were. Seeing Emily in his childhood home had highlighted the vast gap between their experiences, and he wondered whether love would be enough to bridge the differences in their expectations and understanding of the world. The conversation they had that evening was perhaps the most honest they had ever shared about their fears and doubts. Emily admitted that she sometimes felt like she was asking too much of James, expecting him to give up his career and privacy for a relationship that would always be subject to public scrutiny. James confessed that he worried about whether he could provide the kind of support and partnership that Emily deserved, given the constraints that would always define their lives. But as they talked through their concerns, they also reaffirmed their commitment to each other and their unborn child. They acknowledged that their love story was complicated and would require sacrifices from both of them. But they also recognized that what they had found together was worth fighting for. The 3 minutes that had started their journey had led them to this moment of complete honesty about their hopes and fears. They realized that their relationship would never be simple or private, but it could be authentic and meaningful if they continued to face their challenges together with courage and open communication. As Emily fell asleep in James's arms that night, she felt their baby move for the first time. The tiny flutter inside her seemed like a sign of hope, a reminder that despite all the complications and uncertainties they faced, they were creating something beautiful and meaningful together. The child growing inside her represented not just their love but the possibility of a new kind of royal family, one that honored tradition while embracing authentic human connections. The leaked photographs appeared on the front page of every major newspaper in Britain on a Tuesday morning in late spring. Someone had captured Emily and James holding hands as they walked through a private garden at Kensington Palace, their faces close together in intimate conversation. The images were grainy and taken from a distance, but they clearly showed the couple in a moment of unguarded affection. Emily stared at the newspapers spread across her breakfast table, feeling exposed and vulnerable in a way she had never experienced before. The headlines were a mixture of shock, speculation, and judgment, with royal correspondents analyzing every detail of the photographs and questioning the appropriateness of the relationship. They revealed James arrived at her apartment within minutes of the newspapers hitting the stands, his face grim with the knowledge that their carefully planned timeline had been shattered by someone's betrayal. The palace had been preparing for a gradual revelation of their relationship, but the photographs had forced their hand and would require immediate damage control. The most painful aspect of the media coverage was the personal attacks on James's character and background. Several newspapers questioned whether a commoner was suitable for a member of the royal family, while others dredged up details from his military service and family history. Emily felt physically sick reading the dismissive and sometimes cruel commentary about the man she loved. James tried to shield Emily from the worst of the coverage, but she insisted on seeing everything. She needed to understand what they were facing and how the public was reacting to the revelation of their relationship. The comments were a mixture of support and criticism, with younger readers generally more accepting, while older generations expressed concern about tradition and protocol. The palace's response came in the form of an official statement confirming that Lady Emily Windsor and Captain James Rodriguez were in a relationship and requesting privacy during what was described as a personal matter. The statement was carefully worded to acknowledge the relationship without revealing the pregnancy, but it marked the first time the royal family had publicly confirmed such a relationship between a royal and a protection officer. The aftermath of the announcement was more intense than either Emily or James had anticipated. Every aspect of their lives became subject to public scrutiny, from James's military record to Emily's previous relationships. Paparazzi photographers camped outside their known locations, hoping to capture additional intimate moments or signs of the relationship's development. Emily found the constant attention emotionally exhausting, particularly as her pregnancy progressed and she struggled with fatigue and morning sickness. The stress of hiding her condition while managing public interest in her relationship created a pressure that sometimes felt overwhelming. She began to understand why other members of the royal family had chosen to retreat from public life during difficult periods. James faced his own unique challenges as he tried to navigate his new public profile. Military colleagues who had respected him as a professional soldier now saw him through the lens of his relationship with Emily, and he worried that his achievements were being overshadowed by his romantic life. The transition from being an anonymous protection officer to a public figure was jarring and uncomfortable. The most difficult moment came when James's former commanding officer requested a private meeting to discuss the situation. Colonel Harrison had been a mentor to James throughout his military career. The conversation was emotionally charged as they discussed how the relationship might affect James's future opportunities within the military establishment. Harrison was direct about the challenges James would face, explaining that some within the military hierarchy viewed his relationship with Emily as a breach of professional conduct, even though no formal rules had been violated. The colonel's advice was practical but painful. James would need to choose between his military career and his relationship with Emily. As continuing both would be impossible, the conversation forced James to confront the reality that loving Emily would cost him the career that had defined his adult life. He had always known this intellectually, but hearing it stated so bluntly by someone he respected made the sacrifice feel immediate and personal. When he returned to Emily that evening, she could see the pain in his eyes and knew what he had been told. Emily's reaction to James's career crisis revealed the depth of her love and commitment. She offered to end their relationship rather than ask him to give up his military future, but James refused to consider the option. They spent hours talking about their priorities and what they were willing to sacrifice for their love and their unborn child. The decision they reached together was both heartbreaking and liberating. James would formally resign from the military and fully commit to his new role within the palace administration. Emily would take on additional royal duties to demonstrate that their relationship enhanced rather than diminished her service to the crown. Together, they would face whatever criticism came their way while building a life that honored both their love and their responsibilities. The emotional weight of these decisions was compounded by Emily's need to hide her pregnancy from the increasingly intrusive media attention. Every public appearance required careful planning to conceal her growing bump, and the stress of maintaining the deception while dealing with relationship scrutiny began to take a physical toll. The support they received from unexpected sources provided emotional sustenance during this difficult period. Several senior members of the royal family privately expressed their support for Emily's choices, while James received messages of encouragement from military colleagues who admired his courage in choosing love over career advancement. The most meaningful support came from the Queen Mother, who arranged private dinners where Emily and James could relax and be themselves without worrying about public scrutiny. These evenings became precious oases of normalcy in their increasingly complicated lives, allowing them to remember why their relationship was worth the sacrifices they were making. During one such dinner, the Queen Mother shared more details. about her own romantic history and the choices she had made as a young woman. Her stories helped Emily understand that every generation of royals had faced similar conflicts between duty and desire, and that the institution's strength came from its ability to evolve while maintaining its essential character. The conversation also addressed practical concerns about Emily's pregnancy and how they would manage the eventual announcement. The Queen Mother's experience with managing royal births and the associated public interest provided valuable guidance for the challenges ahead, helping Emily feel more prepared for the scrutiny that would accompany her transition to motherhood. As Emily entered her third trimester, the physical realities of her pregnancy became increasingly difficult to conceal. Her doctor warned that the stress of maintaining secrecy could affect both her health and the baby's development, adding urgency to the need for a public announcement about the pregnancy. The decision to reveal Emily's pregnancy was made during an emotional family meeting that included the Queen Mother and senior palace advisors. Emily's voice shook as she explained how the secrecy was affecting her health and well-being, while James spoke about his commitment to supporting both Emily and their child regardless of public reaction. The announcement strategy they developed was designed to present Emily's pregnancy as a joyful development and a loving relationship rather than a scandal to be managed. The statement would emphasize the couple's happiness and their commitment to raising their child within the traditions and values of the royal family, while also honoring James's background and heritage. As they prepared for what would be the most significant announcement of their lives, Emily and James reflected on how much had changed since those 3 minutes that had started their journey. What had begun as a frightening phone call about an unplanned pregnancy had evolved into a love story that was challenging conventions and potentially changing the future of the British monarchy. Did the baby growing inside Emily represented more than just their personal happiness? It symbolized the possibility of a royal family that could embrace change while honoring tradition. It could find strength in authenticity rather than rigid adherence to outdated protocols. The 3 minutes that had initially shaken the palace had ultimately revealed its capacity for adaptation and growth. The announcement of Emily's pregnancy was made on a sunny morning in June, with the palace releasing a carefully crafted statement that emphasized the joy and anticipation surrounding the expected arrival of a new member of the royal family. The statement included a rare personal comment from Emily, expressing her happiness and gratitude for the support she had received during this special time. Public reaction was immediate and intense, dividing along generational and social lines in ways that reflected broader changes in British society. Younger people generally celebrated the news as a sign that the monarchy was modernizing and becoming more relatable, while traditionalists expressed concern about the precedent being set by a royal having a child with someone outside the established aristocracy. The media coverage was relentless, with every aspect of Emily's pregnancy becoming subject to public analysis and speculation. Fashion experts analyzed her maternity wardrobe choices. Medical correspondents discussed her health and well-being, and royal historians debated the implications for the line of succession and royal protocol. Emily found the intensity of the attention overwhelming at times, particularly when reporters began speculating about her due date, the baby's gender, and potential names. The pregnancy that had begun as an intensely private matter between her and James had become a public event that millions of people felt entitled to discuss and analyze. James struggled with his own adjustment to intense public scrutiny, particularly when media coverage focused on his background and family history. Reporters interviewed his former military colleagues, childhood friends, and even tracked down his primary school teachers, seeking any details that might provide insight into his character and suitability as a royal partner. The most painful coverage came when several newspapers published detailed analyses of James's family's financial situation, suggesting that his relationship with Emily was motivated by social and economic advancement rather than genuine love. Emily was furious about these insinuations and wanted to respond publicly, but palace advisors counseled patience and dignity in the face of unfair criticism. The couple's first joint interview was arranged for when Emily was 7 months pregnant, conducted by a respected journalist in the privacy of Kensington Palace. The interview was designed to present their relationship as a mature, committed partnership based on mutual respect and shared values rather than the fairy tale romance that some media outlets had portrayed. Emily was nervous about the interview, knowing that every word would be analyzed and that their responses would shape public perception of their relationship for years to come. James was equally concerned about representing himself and his family with dignity. While being honest about their experiences and challenges, the interview revealed a couple who were deeply in love but also realistic about the challenges they faced. Emily spoke honestly about the difficulties of navigating royal protocol while maintaining an authentic relationship, while James discussed his transition from military service to royal duties and his commitment to supporting Emily in her public role. The most emotional moment came when Emily was asked about becoming a mother and how she hoped to raise her child. Her response, delivered with tears in her eyes, emphasized her desire to give her child both the privileges and responsibilities that came with royal birth, while also ensuring they understood and appreciated James's heritage and values. James's comments about fatherhood were equally moving, as he spoke about his hopes for their child and his determination to be present and involved in their upbringing despite the unique challenges their public life would create. His obvious emotion and sincerity helped counter the negative portrayals of his character that had appeared in some media outlets. The interview was generally well received, with many commentators noting the couple's obvious affection for each other and their thoughtful approach to the challenges they faced. Public opinion polls showed increased support for their relationship, particularly among women and young people who appreciated their honesty and authenticity. As Emily's due date approached, the practical preparations for the birth became increasingly complex. Security arrangements had to be made for the hospital, with James's protection officer background proving valuable in understanding and coordinating the necessary measures. The media's interest in every detail of the birth plan created additional complications that required careful management. Emily's baby shower was a carefully orchestrated event that brought together members of both the royal family and James's relatives, creating some awkward but ultimately heartwarming moments as two very different worlds collided. The Queen Mother's presence helped ease tensions and demonstrated the family's acceptance of James and his background. The most touching moment of the celebration came when James's mother, Rhea, presented Emily with a hand-knitted blanket that had been passed down through 3 generations of her family. The simple, heartfelt gift moved Emily to tears and symbolized the blending of traditions that their child would represent. Emily's labor began 3 weeks before her due date. A quiet evening when she and James were at home reviewing birth plans and finalizing nursery arrangements, the sudden onset of contractions caught them both off guard. And Emily's initial panic was calmed by James's steady presence and military-trained ability to remain composed under pressure. The journey to the hospital was surreal, with police escorts clearing the way while Emily focused on managing her contractions. James held her hand throughout the journey, providing constant reassurance and support while coordinating with security teams and medical staff. The birth itself was relatively straightforward, but the emotional intensity of the experience overwhelmed both Emily and James. As their daughter entered the world with a healthy cry, both parents wept with relief and joy, momentarily forgetting about the public attention that awaited them outside the hospital walls. The first moments with their daughter were precious and private, allowing Emily and James to bond with their child before facing the world as new parents. Emily was struck by how perfectly normal and natural the experience felt despite the extraordinary circumstances surrounding their relationship and the baby's birth. James's reaction to becoming a father was profound and visible. Daughter with gentle confidence and spoke to her in soft tones about the love and protection she would always receive from both her parents. Emily watched this tender scene and felt certain that despite all the challenges they had faced, they had made the right choices for their family. The official announcement of the birth was made within hours, accompanied by the first photographs of the new princess. The images showed Emily and James as clearly exhausted but radiantly happy new parents, holding their daughter with obvious love and pride. Public reaction to the birth was overwhelmingly positive, with messages of congratulation pouring in from around the world. The baby's arrival seemed to solidify public acceptance of Emily and James's relationship, many people expressing admiration for their journey and hopes for their family's future happiness. As Emily recovered from the birth and adjusted to motherhood, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with 3 minutes that had initially seemed to threaten everything she held dear. The phone call that had announced her pregnancy had led to challenges she could never have imagined. But it had also brought her the greatest happiness of her life. The daughter sleeping in her arms represented not just her and James's love, but the possibility of a new kind of royal family that could honor tradition while embracing change. The 3 minutes that had shaken the palace had ultimately strengthened it by demonstrating that love, its authenticity and courage could triumph over convention and expectation. Looking at James, as he gazed at their daughter with wonder and devotion, Emily knew that every sacrifice they had made had been worthwhile. The criticism they had endured, the careers that had been changed, and the privacy they had lost all seemed insignificant compared to the family they had created together. The baby's first official portrait session was scheduled for when she was 6 weeks old, and Emily was both excited and nervous about introducing her daughter to the world in a more formal way. The photographs would become part of royal history, documenting not just the arrival of a new princess, but the evolution of the monarchy itself. James's adjustment to fatherhood was remarkable to witness. The man who had once been trained to protect others with his life now channeled that same devotion into caring for his daughter. Emily watched him during nighttime feedings and diaper changes, marveling at how naturally he had embraced his new role despite having no previous experience with babies. The support they received from James's parents during those early weeks was invaluable. Maria arrived to help with the baby, bringing practical wisdom and emotional support that Emily had never experienced from her own more formal family relationships. The contrast between royal protocol and genuine maternal care highlighted the unique environment their daughter would grow up experiencing. The most meaningful moment came when the Queen Mother visited to meet her newest great-granddaughter. The elderly monarch held the baby with practiced ease, and Emily saw tears in her eyes as she looked at the child who represented so much hope and change for the family's future. The Queen Mother's blessing of their little family felt like the final seal of acceptance and approval. As the weeks passed, Emily and James began to find their rhythm as parents while managing the continued public interest in their family. They were determined to give their daughter as normal a childhood as possible while acknowledging the unique responsibilities that came with her royal birth. The baby's christening was planned as a blend of royal tradition and personal meaning, with both Anglican customs and elements that honored James's Catholic heritage. The ceremony would take place at Windsor Castle, but the guest list would include both royal relatives and James's military colleagues, creating a celebration that truly represented their merged families. Emily's return to public duties was carefully managed to allow her time to bond with her daughter, while gradually resuming her royal responsibilities. The public's reaction to seeing her as a new mother was overwhelmingly positive, with many people expressing admiration for how she balanced motherhood with her official obligations. James's new role within the palace administration had evolved to include responsibilities related to security and international relations, allowing him to use his military expertise while supporting Emily's work. He had found renewed purpose in his career transition, realizing that service to the crown could take many forms and that his contribution was valued and respected. The first Christmas with their daughter was a particularly emotional time for both Emily and James, watching their baby experience the wonder of the holiday season, surrounded by family members who had come to love and accept their unconventional love story. Felt like the perfect culmination of their journey from that first frightening phone call to this moment of complete happiness. As Emily looked back on the year that had transformed her life so completely, she realized that the 3 minutes that had initially shaken her world had actually been the beginning of its reconstruction on a foundation of authentic love and genuine partnership. The challenges they had faced had only strengthened their bond and their commitment to building a family that honored both tradition and personal truth. The daughter sleeping peacefully in the palace nursery represented not just their personal happiness but a new chapter in the story of the British royal family. She would grow up knowing that love had triumphed over convention. That authenticity was more valuable than adherence to outdated expectations, and that true nobility came from the courage to follow one's heart while serving something greater than oneself. The 3 minutes that had shaken the British palace had ultimately become the foundation for a love story that would inspire others. To believe that even the most impossible dreams could come true with courage, determination, and the support of those who truly understood the value of authentic human connection. 5 years after that life-changing phone call, Emily stood in the same window of her Buckingham Palace apartment, but everything about her world had transformed. The gardens below were filled with the laughter of her daughter, Princess Isabella, who was playing with her younger brother, Prince Alexander, born 2 years after his sister. The children's joyful voices carried up to Emily's window, a sound that never failed to fill her heart with contentment. James entered the room behind her, carrying their youngest child, 18-month-old, Prince Michael, who had inherited his father's dark eyes and his mother's stubborn determination. The sight of her husband with their son still moved Emily deeply, reminding her of how much courage it had taken for both of them to choose love over convention and build the family they now cherished. The public's acceptance of their family had grown stronger with each passing year and each new addition to their household. What had once been seen as a controversial relationship was now viewed as a modern fairy tale, proof that the monarchy could evolve while maintaining its essential dignity and purpose. Emily and James had become symbols of authentic love and commitment, inspiring countless couples who faced their own challenges in pursuing relationships that defied social expectations. The children's upbringing reflected the careful balance. Emily and James had struck between royal tradition and personal values. Isabella spoke fluent Spanish as well as English, honoring her father's heritage, while also learning the protocols and responsibilities that came with her position in the line of succession. Alexander showed early signs of his father's protective instincts and his mother's diplomatic skills. While little Michael was still too young to understand anything beyond the love that surrounded him daily, Emily's role within the royal family had expanded significantly over the years. With her obvious happiness and successful family life enhancing rather than diminishing her effectiveness as a working royal, she had become a passionate advocate for military families and children's welfare, causes that reflected both her own experiences and James's background. Her authenticity and genuine care for the people she served had made her one of the most popular members of the royal family. James had found his calling in his work with veterans organizations and international security initiatives, using his military experience to address issues he cared deeply about while supporting Emily's official duties. His transition from protection officer to royal consort had been complete and successful, earning him respect from colleagues and the public alike for his dedication and integrity. The most touching development had been the relationship between their children and James's parents, who had embraced their roles as grandparents with joy and enthusiasm. Maria and Carlos had become beloved figures within the extended royal family, bringing warmth and authenticity to formal occasions while providing their grandchildren with connections to their Hispanic heritage and working-class roots. The Queen, mother now in her 80s, took particular pleasure in her great-grandchildren, and often spoke about how their presence in the family had brought new energy and purpose to the monarchy. Her decision to support Emily and James's relationship had been vindicated by the happiness and stability they had brought to the royal family and the positive public response to their modern approach to royal life. The anniversary of that first phone call had become a private celebration for Emily and James, a day when they reflected on their journey and recommitted to the choices that had brought them such joy. This year's anniversary was particularly meaningful because Emily had received another phone call that morning, this one from her doctor with different but equally life-changing news. Emily had suspected for several weeks that she might be pregnant again, but the confirmation still filled her with the same mixture of joy and anticipation she had felt with each of their previous children. At 33, she felt more confident in her role as both a mother and a royal, ready to welcome another child into their loving and unconventional family. When she shared the news with James, his reaction was immediate and overwhelming. He swept her into his arms with a joy that reminded her of their first moments together as new parents, when they had discovered that love could indeed triumph over the most daunting obstacles. Their children's excited reactions to the news of a new sibling filled the apartment with laughter and celebration. The announcement of Emily's fourth pregnancy was met with widespread public delight, with many commenting on how the growing family represented the vitality and future of the monarchy. The couple's obvious happiness and the children's evident well-being had won over even their harshest critics, creating a narrative of success and fulfillment that inspired people around the world. As Emily prepared for another pregnancy in the public eye, she reflected on how different this experience would be from her first. There would still be scrutiny and attention, but it would be tempered by the respect and affection she and James had earned through their years of dedicated service and authentic partnership. The children were old enough now, too. I'd understand that. Their family was special and different from others. But Emily and James had worked hard to ensure they also understood the responsibilities that came with their privileges. Isabella, at 5, already showed signs of the grace and compassion that would serve her well in her future royal role, while Alexander's protective instincts toward his younger siblings reminded Emily of his father's dedication to keeping others safe. The family's evening routine had become a sacred time for Emily and James, when they could focus entirely on their children and each other without the demands of public life intruding. Reading bedtime stories, helping with prayers, and tucking each child into bed provided moments of pure domestic happiness that Emily treasured above any royal ceremony or state occasion, as she and James sat together in their private sitting room after the children were asleep. Emily often thought about the scared young woman who had received that first phone call 5 years earlier. That person seemed like a different lifetime, someone who had been afraid of scandal and judgment, rather than confident in her ability to create positive change through authentic choices. The transformation had not been easy or immediate. There had been moments of doubt, criticism that stung, and sacrifices that felt overwhelming. But each challenge had ultimately strengthened their bond and their conviction that love, when combined with dedication and integrity, could overcome any obstacle. Their love story had become part of royal history. But more importantly, it had become the foundation for a family that embodied the best of both tradition and progress. Their children would grow up knowing that their parents had chosen each other against all odds and built a life based on mutual respect, genuine affection, and shared commitment to serving others. The 3 minutes that had initially shaken the British palace had ultimately strengthened it, by demonstrating that the monarchy's greatest asset was not rigid adherence to outdated conventions, but its ability to adapt and evolve. While maintaining its essential character and purpose, Emily and James's family represented the future of the institution, one that could honor its history while embracing the changes necessary to remain relevant and beloved. As Emily placed her hand on her still flat stomach, feeling the early flutter of new life, she smiled at the thought of another child joining their extraordinary family. This baby, like its siblings, would be born into a world where love had triumphed over expectation, where authenticity was valued above appearance, and where the courage to follow one's heart had created possibilities that no one could have imagined. The journey that had begun with fear and uncertainty had become a testament to the power of love to transform not just individual lives, but entire institutions. The 3 minutes that had once threatened to destroy everything Emily held dear had instead become the foundation for the greatest happiness she had ever known, proving that sometimes the most frightening moments in life are actually the beginning of the most beautiful chapters. Looking out at the gardens where her children played, surrounded by centuries of royal history, but secure in a love that had redefined what it meant to be a modern royal family, Emily knew that every moment of difficulty had been worth this perfect, impossible, wonderful life they had built together.